Hazur, I have a question from chapter 66, verses 12-13.
Very interesting. With the help of Nuh,
we are covering many verses of the Quran which need to be specially attended. And but for his help, they would never have come to our mind. Right? So I thank him on behalf of all the audience and viewers.
So these are two last verses of Surah At-Tahrim, to which he has pointed out. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وضرب الله مثلا للذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون إذ قالت رب ابن لي عندك بيتا في الجنة ونجني من فرعون وعمله ونجني من القوم الظالمين ومريم ابنة عمران التي أحسنت فرجها فنفخنا فيه من روحنا وصدقت بكلمات ربها وكتبه وكانت من القانتين. And Allah holds forth as an example for those who believe the wife of Pharaoh when she said, My Lord, build for me a house with thee in the garden and deliver me from Pharaoh and his work and deliver me from the wrongdoing people. And sets forth as an example Mary, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity, so we breathed into him of our spirit and she fulfilled the prophecy conveyed to her in the words of her Lord contained in his books, and she was one of the obedient.
Hazur, you can explain to us how the believers are likened with the wife of Pharaoh and Maryam bint Imran?
It's a very good question. In fact, it has been addressed to me for many, many years in the past. And also I raised this question with non-Ahmadi scholars who visit me. So I answer this question as far as Ahmadis go, and I put this question to non-Ahmadi scholars to explain what it means. It's a very useful two verses in favor of Ahmadiyya belief about Jesus and Ahmadiyya belief about how a believer should be. There are two possibilities. Some believers are oppressed by an overwhelming despotic rule, and under the excuse of being oppressed, they hide their faith and cannot tolerate the acts of antagonism against them by the dictators, whoever they are. But Allah quotes the example of Pharaoh's wife. Pharaoh was one of the most despotic persons on earth who ever lived, who ever ruled the country. His example is given repeatedly in the Holy Quran as a person completely merciless and with total power. So he claimed that I can make people live and I can make people die. He had the two attributes of Allah appropriated for himself. He causes people to die and he causes people to live. And he was so completely despotic and possessed power so totally that he even claimed to be repeating what God does in heaven or on the earth. So he sort of misappropriated the powers of Allah as well. Right? Under him was his wife, who is mentioned here in the Quran. And she refused to accept his claims. And he repeatedly mentioned his belief in Moses, who was brought up by her herself. So in the palace of Pharaoh, for a woman to live who also happens to be queen, in defiance of Pharaoh's spiritual rule, and complained to Allah of whatever she was suffering, not to any other humans. This is the best possible example which is quoted or presented before every Muslim. If you can't be better than that, at least try to equal the wife of Pharaoh. She has become a model for all times, for all the oppressed people in the name of Allah. Worse conditions than that she faced, than those which she faced, cannot be envisioned. And yet she stood firm and said that, build me a house in the heaven, not in the garden, as it is translated. What she says is not that Allah should build her a house in the garden of Pharaoh. Evidently she is begging Allah to build a house in the heaven, in the paradise hereafter. That also shows that her own sense of belonging to the house of Pharaoh had completely gone. As far as she was concerned, it was no house that she was living in. She had no powers, nothing that a landlady possesses in her own house. So another very piteous prayer that she is making is this, that, oh God, this is no house of mine where Pharaoh rules. I want you to build me a house instead in the heavens, in the hereafter. Now this is the example given by the Holy Quran for every believer who faces any opposition from the people or from the rulers or from anywhere in the name of Allah. If he cannot do better than that woman of Pharaoh, he should at least try to equal her. It's a challenge for all believers. What a beautiful way of expressing the freedom of faith under the worst possible oppressor. And the Muslims are expected to follow that example. Let me first translate this and then I'll turn to the second part. And the next verse relates to the best status of the mu'min or believer which Allah expects of him. The lowest status is this, which resembles the great woman of the house of Pharaoh. If that is the worst status, imagine, the lowest, what should be the highest? The highest is likened unto the case of Mary. She never desired anything for herself. The spiritual son born to her was born not of any private desires which she had. So she had no relationship with satanic ambitions which may stir the heart of a woman. So whatever was granted to her was granted entirely from Allah, not because of any sexual or worldly involvement by the lady herself. So this is an example, for the best example for the believers to follow. They should never desire their own ambitions to be fulfilled spiritually. In fact, they should have no ambition whatsoever to rise in their spiritual status, like Mary didn't have any. So if a mu'min, a true believer, gets rid of all his personal involvement with the spiritual status with Allah, then it is Allah who bestows that person a spiritual status, entirely from himself. So one has to negate his own ego completely. That is what Mary did. And then whatever is bestowed upon such a believer is bestowed entirely from Allah, with no participation of his own ego in whatever Allah bestows upon him. Now this is the case of Jesus, son of Mary. So within a believer, there always is a Jesus. That is, he himself is to be raised to the status of a Jesus. So his case is like that of Mary, which is a woman, and that of Jesus, which is a man. A man is born out of the woman who has negated all worldly pleasures to herself. A moment a believer has to become a Mary before he can ever expect to be raised to the status of Jesus by Allah. So from within a believer springs forth a spiritual Jesus. This is the message of this verse. And the message is so clear that even the blind should see. In the first instance, the reference given to the woman Mary is in feminine. Farjaha, repeat.
Maryam ibnata Imran allati ahsanat farjaha.
Ahsanat farjaha. It's her that is referred to in this. And when Allah bestows a spiritual status, He bestows it not to her, but to the man within her. And there, reference is masculine. Read it.
فَنَفَخْنَا فِيهِ بِرُوحِنَا.
فَنَفَخْنَا, and Allah doesn't say فِيهَا بِرُوحِنَا. نَفَخْنَا فِيهِ بِرُوحِنَا. Believer is a man. And a man in the sense that he is worthy of being raised to the status of a prophethood. So first he has to be a Mary and sacrifice all his ambition for the sake of Allah. Then from him will rise a Jesus when Allah bestows His Spirit upon him, breathes His Spirit into him. This is the second part. Now the beauty of this inference is this, that a similar verse is found elsewhere in the case of the first Jesus which was born physically. And there both the references are in feminine. Can you read that verse? Another verse speaks of Mary having guarded her chastity, and then Allah having breathed into her, and then a Jesus is born. That Jesus is different from the one promised to the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There it was a physical birth which Allah referred to. Here it was a spiritual birth to take place from within the masculine Mary of the Ummah, or the status of a believer while it was previously in a feminine status, like Mary was. Then Allah breathes into him the hidden Jesus in him, and then he rises to the status of a prophet of God or one appointed by God. Please.
وَالَّتِي أَحْسَنَتْ فَرْجَهَا فَنَفَخْنَا فِيهَا مِنْ رُوحِنَا وَجَعَلْنَاهَا وَابْنَهَا آيَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ.
See, the first birth of Jesus is referred to in this verse. In both cases, it is a feminine gender which is used by Allah. Listen with care.
والتي أحسنت فرجها فنفخنا فيها من روحنا
فيها من روحنا. Again.
وجعلناها وابنها آية للعالمين.
Even is masculine, but breathing is into Mary. In both cases, feminine gender is used. So, evidently, this is a reference to the previous Jesus. This is a reference to the Jesus to be born in the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Here, the second reference is directly masculine and not a feminine reference. Read again.
ومريم ابنة عمران التي أحسنت فرجها فنفخنا فيه من روحنا.
See? فيه من روحنا.
صدقت بكلمات ربها وكتبه وكانت من القانتين.
No, if you translate, I'm coming.